Welcome back again, Realty Pros. As we said, today we're diving into Brokermint. We talked about our transition from Dotloop to Brokermint as of May the 1st. We will be getting rid of Dotloop and going to Brokermint full-time, which is excellent because everything's going to be streamlined. You'll be able to create your transactions from beginning till end and only use one system. So now no longer will you have to upload documents from one system into the other, from Dotloop into Brokermint, but you'll have everything there. And there were some very exciting things that we talked about on last week's training. So Curtis, I would love to have you to share some things, and anybody else who was on the call last week and learned some things, or even if you've had a chance to play around with the system since then, I'd love to hear your insight and feedback. Go ahead, Curtis.
Yeah, so one of the really cool features that really stood out to me with last week's training was the ability to literally just take Brokermint, and that's going to walk you through the entire process. So either from, you're on the buying side, or if you're on the listing side, that, just for this example, being on the buying side. So once you kind of have your offer ratified, and how documents just start kind of flying around if you need an addendum for this or an extension or anything kind of going back and forth. One of the real cool features is, and I'm not in front of a computer, but within your Brokermint file for that particular 123 house, you can literally there's an email link in there, and if I get an email from, just say, the listing agent, the addendum is now signed by both parties, so it's good to go. I can literally just take the email and forward it to that Brokermint email that they give you, and it pops right into your file. So it replaces that step of having to download, upload into Dotloop, or download it again and now move it over here. So the ease of use is just phenomenal. So I'm really looking forward to having like my entire transaction emailing back and forth to the other agent, to the lender, to title, all within Brokermint. So it's like you don't have to leave. You basically can manage everything. I started working on a listing that I have coming up, and editing the fields. It's so much easier than Dotloop. I mean, you literally just, like, if there's two signatures, I just have one seller. I can just, highlight over the other one, throw it in the trash can, throw that one in the trash can because I don't need it, and just kind of go through your document. I was really impressed with the ease of use. I mean, there's still some things, guys, that, like, it's just going to take time, and, you're going to have to play with it to get more familiar with it. But the big picture, it's a game changer. It's going to be so good for all of our businesses and just managing our transactions. So good stuff.
Thank you so much for sharing, Curtis. I'm excited to hear your excitement behind this. When you guys actually walk through this process, you're going to see how much time it's going to shave off each of your transactions. And like Curtis said, even being able to email the agents directly from there, being able to capture signatures, have everything that you need already in the Brokermint portal, so you no longer have to transfer back and forth and find various addenda and email that correspond to your transactions, but having everything there. We are so excited. So as of May the 1st, Dotloop will be gone. We will be full force, full speed ahead with Brokermint. So I'm going to walk through a transaction from beginning so that you guys can see exactly what we did last weekend. Even if you recall it from last week, it's going to help to have that repetition so that by the time May 1st gets here, we are all experts in this. So as Curtis was talking about, sure.
Hey, before you go, I just wanted you to give you the update. I did look, if you want to log in under the trainer, it's the trainer.
I just did. That's where I am. Okay.
Good.
I'm on the trainer account now, so that's excellent. Thank you.
No problem. Bye-bye.
All right. So You guys are gonna see this one is gonna have a blank slate. Yours is not gonna have a blank slate because it's gonna have all the other information that you've already had in Brokermint. But here, I'm gonna go ahead and create a transaction, and this is loading. Let's see. And as this is loading, we've gone through creating transactions, so you know what you're gonna do. Very much like when we were in Dotloop, if it was on the buying side of the transaction, you didn't have a property address just yet, so you name it as the buyer's name. And we determined that the city, state, and zip code are gonna be that from the office. Mr. Porter, did you just update that? I'm wondering if you updated it while I was in it. If so, I might have to log out and log back in. Mr. Porter? Unmute yourself for me, please. Did you just update that in the moment? Gotcha. Send me that new information. Apologies, guys. I was in the former account, but we have a brand new one, which is great. Go ahead and send me that access information, and I will stop this spinning wheel that says loading. Because when you log in, it will not continue to say loading like this. All right, so I'm going to sign out and sign back in. And text me that info for the trainer account, please. So as we were saying, on the buying side of the transaction, you'll see that we're going to name it just the way we always have. It's going to be the buyer's name. For the listing side of the transaction, you're going to name it the property address. Okay, so let me go ahead and log in here. All right, we're right in now. All right, perfect. So for transactions, we come to transactions and you see how quickly that goes for you. You simply scroll down to create a transaction. Now, one of the things that we'll point out again, as we did last week, for your sale type, if it's a traditional sale, you choose traditional sale, whatever your sale type is, you're going to choose it over here. Most importantly, I want you guys to pay attention to, with Brokermint, there are two options, either listing or pending, okay? Don't want you to be off put by the fact that it says listing. Those are the only options that Brokermint gives you. For listing, that's going to be any transaction, whether it's a buyer or a seller. The most important piece is the pending. That's what you're going to go back and update your transaction to once you're actually under contract, okay? But for the sake of the training and your daily transactions, all of them are going to be under listing, just at this point where it says status, because that's not the transaction type, it's just the status, okay? So we're going to go through a buyer's transaction first. So I'm going to go ahead and name this the buyer's name. All right. And for the city, state, and zip code, we're going to go ahead and put the office. All right. And the price point, go ahead and put the buyer's pre-approval price in there. Okay. All right. Now let's put, so we're going to simulate a closing date. This information is going to be updated once you get under contract. It's very important to update it and put the specific information, but just to generate your contract, your transaction, and ensure that your checklist is in order. There are a couple dates that you're going to have to put there. And Mr. Porter, would you reiterate those two dates that are most necessary?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so for your buyer, you're gonna have to put an acceptance date and a closing date. And the reason why those two dates are important, because they are anchor dates that govern the checklist. So they are the dates that tell the checklist which order to be in, so to speak, so that as you go through the checklist, it tells you what to do or when things should be happening. And if you're not answering or checking off those things during in that checklist, it'll give you it'll turn red on you. So it'll stay black until the date. So if you go in on a daily basis and look at your calendar, it'll tell you what you're supposed to be doing today, what you should be doing next week, what you should be doing this month. And it'll take you through that checklist so that you stay on target in terms of what you should be doing within that transaction. So you definitely, buyers, you need an acceptance and a closing date. And then with the listings, you need a listing date. You need to put all the dates actually in there: listing date and the expiration date. And then
You're going out, but I can complete that sentence. It's a little bit different on the listing side. For the buying side, when you create this transaction, like Mr. Porter said, you're choosing the acceptance date and the closing date. Now, these will be updated once you get under contract. When that happens, your status is going to change from listing to pending. Once it changes from listing to pending, you're actually going to have specific dates that are in your contract that you're going to update this to. When you get to the listing side, it's a little bit different because in the listing, your listing date's going to go there, and so is your expiration date. You won't yet have the acceptance date or the closing date, and we'll walk that through so that it makes sense. So for now, let's just continue to create this transaction on the buying side. You go to next.
Excuse me,
Yes,
can I ask a question?
you sure can, Anita. You're our buyer for today. You can ask any question you want.
I see, thank you. So the question is, so we have to put a transaction date and a closing date, or an acceptance date rather, and a closing date. So I'm assuming that we're just putting the acceptance date as of the date that we loaded in there, or?
So
yes.
you can put the acceptance date of the date you loaded in there, and I'll do that for today, just so that nobody's confused.
So, so to answer neither, I think what you're saying is for the buyer side. So you don't have an acceptance date when you're creating that transaction yet. So
Right.
for the sake of using the tool, you do want to put the date that you open that transaction up as your temporary acceptance.
Right, that's what right. So the answer was correct for both of you all. You guys get an A. Thank you.
And thank you for being our buyer today.
Absolutely.
Okay. Excellent. So that was a great question, and thank you for asking that, Anita. All right, so next we're going to go to the commissions piece. Now, because you're on the buying side, remember you're going to select who you're representing. So the buying side is represented by Porterhouse. You're going to choose save. And for your buyer brokerage commission, we're just going to go ahead and put 3.5% there. And then we're going to add the agent. Remember, this is a critical step. Okay, so let's see, who else do we have on? Who's our agent for today? Who do we have with us? Okay. So Talita, you're going to be our agent for today, okay? So Talita is the buyer's agent. Now, remember, we went through this piece as well because a lot of you are partnering and we want even more of you to partner, work together as accountability partners, team members, or whatever the case is. But this is very important so that when you are sharing a commission, you have that information properly represented in Brokermint, and this is how you do it, okay? So for this commission, Talita, she's a buyer's agent, and she has 100% of her commission there. However, if she adds another agent, okay, so we have Angela here. And then now we've got to determine what the split is. And this is between you guys, but let's just say, for instance, you're working together on a transaction and you're both doing everything you need to do there and you're sharing that 3.5%, you're sharing that between the two of you 50-50. You want to make sure that that's represented because that's very important, okay? So you're going to go ahead and go to next. Now you're going to add the contacts. And this serves very similar to what the View Details tab did in Dotloop, how you're adding people's information. And once you do, then this is the information that Brokermint is going to use in order to populate it into your forms. Okay, so you want to make sure that you add the contact there. Who do we need to add? You're working on the buying side, so you're going to add your buyer's information there, right? So that's going to be your buyer's email address. Let's see. Okay, it already has Anita's email address, so we're good with that. Okay, if I wanted to add a transaction coordinator, I can say, okay, who's the transaction coordinator? That's Talita. So for now, we're going to go ahead and move forward and create that transaction. All right, so now you see what we have. Now, the most important thing to do once you've created that transaction is going to be to add your checklist. So you see on the left-hand side of the screen where it says add, it already has a template there for buying, but you have options. You can do a checklist for buying, listing, rental, tenancy, all of those. So you're going to choose the buying checklist. And as we already input, you see your acceptance date and you see your closing date. All right. Buyer's agent's name. And we're going to go to add. All right. Now here's when the magic happens. Now this is what it is. This is how we're able to manage the entire transaction from one place because we put this information in there, right? So now here's your checklist. So whether you're doing one transaction or 100 transactions, this is how you're going to stay on target. This is how you're going to make sure that everything is done in an impeccable way for each one of the clients that you're working with. You have everything there you need. You've added the information. You should go ahead and schedule your buyer consultation. You're going to know what you need to do. But now here are your agency documents, right? So you just set that buyer up, but now you need to have agency documents signed. So what do? You simply click there, but now this is going to validate my email address, which is great for all of you to know because your very first time in there, it's going to need to validate your email address. So let me go ahead to my email so as to validate that, and it will allow you to continue to move forward. So know that when you get that notification there, that's normal, okay? All right, so let me go to 1 second so I can go to the email and validate that email address. You can see exactly what that looks like. Does anybody have any questions thus far?
I think I'm gonna have to validate it for you, Jasmine.
Okay.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Sure.
I have a few. What's the difference between rental and rental tenancy?
So we can walk through those, and one is when you're the listing agent for the seller, and one is when you're the tenant's agent.
Okay. All right. And then
Mr. Porter, if you're validating it for me, please send me the link.
and the other question was, what is a transaction coordinator? Because I noticed that you used 2 agents, and so I was wondering what's the difference there, or
So great question. I'm glad you asked that question. So for those of you that are working together, one of you could be the transaction coordinator, or you, depending on how you determine to work your transaction, one person may be the transaction coordinator, or you may hire a transaction coordinator, but anybody that you want to give the ability to be able to look at the checklist and to manage and govern parts of the transaction, that's your transaction coordinator, because they'll see everything on your checklist. They'll also be able to update, add, send information on your behalf, and so forth and so on. Okay?
all right.
Make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
You got it. All right, so let's see. Now that that email is validated. So just so that, let me go ahead and share this again. All right, so just so that you guys know, your very first time doing this, you'll have to go to your actual Porterhouse email and validate it, because now you're gonna have access to all the documents. So we've just validated that email account, and let me go out of this and go back so you can see where we started. We're at the point on this checklist where it says sign agency docs and activate the MLS auto search. All right, so you need to get your agency docs signed. Do you want to have to go elsewhere, or should you just have them right at the tip of your fingers? I'd vote for B. Here you go. So you're going to click on use forms, and here's everything that you need right there. So you're simply going to go to next. Your forms are there. Put my NERDS ID in there. This is something very important for you guys to know. This is what you're going to have to do. Okay, so I already have an account under Jasmine Porter, so it may not let me do this under the trainer. So for now, for you guys, you won't have more than one account. So it will, when you put your NERDS ID in there, you won't have any problem. I'll try it one more time. And if it does give me pushback, then I can just go in through my account if need be, but we'll move forward to the next step. Does everybody have their NERDS ID?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so as you can see, it will not allow you to enter your information on more than one account. So it's going to be directly connected to you. But here's what happens. When you open up use forms, all of your forms come up right there. So your understanding home, your consent for dual agency, notification of dual agency within a team, exclusive buyer agent or buyer tenant representation, and then a new form that Mar has given us, and that's the consumer notice to buyers of residential real estate. All right, so when we go to next there, I'm going to scroll past that, because once you do input your NERDS ID, it's going to allow you to update and send those forms. All right, so the next step in the process, after you've sent your agency documents for signatures, once you get that property, once you find the right property for that buyer, you're going to need to go ahead and get those disclosures. You're going to be able to upload those disclosures from your computer. Let's just use something as an example. We'll find, let's see. Upload something as a sample there. Just so that you guys can see what it looks like. All right, so now I upload this document. Now, if I want to prepare this document for e-signing, I can. Okay, so let me go ahead and go back so that you can see what this looks like. If I want to go to e-sign, I can add a signer. If I want to have Anitha to sign, I can add another signer. Talita, I can add another signer, Angela, and then I can also assign the signer order. What does that mean? I know that all of us have likely experienced when you use Dotloop, and if you send it to multiple people, if one person has the document open, it'll say that there's an error on the other end, or it will say that somebody is in the transaction. So it'll lock everybody else out of the documents. And that has happened quite a number of times to our clients. This is going to allow us to not have to ever experience that again, okay? So once you assign the signers, you give them a specific order. So once the first party has signed off, then it'll be released to the next party. Then it'll be released to the next, and so forth and so on. That way, all of them have updated documents and nobody gets locked out, okay? So then we're gonna go to next. All right, so this one is an actual PDF copy. Once I'm able to input my NERDS ID, and you guys do that, you guys are gonna have the electronic copies. So your electronic copies won't need to be updated like this one. Okay, so this is from an actual transaction, but I'm glad that we're here because you'll be able to see this system in, I guess, multiple uses there. So in the event that you need to add anything to this, you'll see how to add it. This is already filled in, but let's just say by chance I needed to add something. I can go right here to text, and I can add that text box there, and I can go ahead and type something in. If I wanted to say, let's see. I'm gonna go ahead and stretch that across. All right, that's just an example of a text. So in the event that I needed to add an initial, okay, so that's going to be a space right there. And of course, I can size this. We're not doing everything for the sake of today, but you'll be able to size it and move it around. I just want you guys to see how that's going to work out. And you can scroll, hit the drop down and determine who you want to sign there. If I have Anita to sign in that space, I can do the exact same thing for any other space. These, of course, are already filled in, but this is how you're going to use it. So let's just say by chance you wanted to give me something else that you guys want to see us do on this.
So can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, so just say for instance, you're in the negotiation process of it and you know, you've already presented your offer, the seller has come back to you with a counter offer and or you want to maybe update your offer. So like in Dotloop, if you do that, if you change anything in the document, then you have to have them sign again. Can this just, are you able to like strike through, add a new maybe initial or signature spot? Well, generally isn't a signature, but a new initial box, and then just send it like that, or?
That is an excellent question, and yes, you can. So there's a strike through at the top. If I needed to strike through something, right there, and I move that down in the event that I needed to do a strike through. And of course, you can drag that to make it as long or short as you need it to. And then I would simply add another initial
Okay.
box.
Okay, all of that. I didn't pay attention to that up there.
It's okay. No, I'm glad you asked because we hadn't touched on those as of yet, but you can do all of those. So at the top, you can include text. If you need to include a dollar sign, it's there. If you need to do a strike through, it's there. If you need to add a checkbox, signature, initial, or date. Okay, so all that information is right at the top for you. All right, so now we're going to go to save and close. All right.
Ms. Porter,
Yes.
this is Aurelia. I have a question about that. What prevents someone changing a form and you not knowing about it if you can add things that weren't originally added in there in the document?
So this is to a PDF document. So that's a very good question. When you actually open your NERDS ID, it's going to give you an interactive document. And your interactive document, when you won't be able to change those signatures and initials on the interactive piece. It's no different than it was in Dotloop. When you have a PDF, you can do updates. And you and I both know for all of our information, and I'm glad you asked that on this forum, anytime there's any update or change to the document, it must be signed off on by all parties. So the hope is that you won't run across anybody that tries to do anything nefarious, because that literally is against all regulations and all those things. So that's for us and for any agent that you're working with as well. If they were to update anything and just try to send it back over and change a document, that's falsifying a document. So that's something that they would be in very hot water for. So go ahead, Mr. Porter.
I was going to say another thing, Anita, that especially we're talking about working within Brokermint. Anything that you do within Brokermint is recorded as an activity. So yes. Just Jasmine typing right now, it'll tell every time she put a comment or she changed something, it'll say activity. We'll get an activity report. So you'll be able to see any changes that happen to any document within the, and I think she's showing it to you now, so you can see that. So everything is recorded that you're doing.
Excellent, thanks.
You got it. And thanks for asking that question. That's a great question. All right. And that's just a reminder to all of us. In the event that there are any counters that go back and forth, all parties must sign off on every counter. Okay. Does anybody know why the parties, or can somebody give me, there are at least 2 really good reasons why all parties must sign off on any counter? Can anybody take a guess?
I guess just to make sure that all parties are in agreement of what the changes or the counters are.
Absolutely. If
Yeah.
all parties are not in agreement, let's say by chance somebody added something to the document and your seller didn't know, they didn't sign off on it. What does it mean for that contract?
It's not a
Void.
ratified contract at that point.
It is not a ratified contract. It is voidable because there was not a full meeting of the minds. All parties did not agree to those terms. So you run the risk of just having a transaction going completely down the drain. So for a person that, you know, does so intentionally, that's somebody who would be in really hot water. Okay, so for us, we got to look and make sure that all of our signatures and initials are there. Even by mistake, you want to make sure, even if by mistake there's a missing signature or initial, you want to make sure that you're diligent to pay attention to those, because for that very same reason, with signatures and initials being missing, that contract is not fully ratified. And we've got to protect the interests of our buyers and our sellers. And we've got to make sure that when we are leading them into a contract, that contract is as fully binding as possible so that they stand the best chance of closing that transaction and, you know, getting what it is that they intended to receive in the first place, whether it's their house sold or a house purchase, and not have the other party to have some type of technicality where they can get out and say, oh, well, the contract wasn't fully ratified because I didn't agree to this particular term. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
All right, excellent. Okay, so this is how we're going to use those forms. I want to add something else here, because you see where it says write a great offer? When you click on that, your offer documents are going to be here. There are more being added, such as your synopsis page and everything else that you need. I want you to pay attention, because the disclosures that are necessary from the listing agent side are not going to be here. But remember, the step before that, you were adding those disclosures, and all of them need to be signed off on by your buyer. In the event that you need to add more forms, you can add forms. You have 3 different options here. Okay, you see the library that says the company library. The Maryland Realtors Library is what you'll have access to once you put your NERDS ID in there. And as we learned, you can't have more than one Brokermint account attached to the same NERDS ID. It won't accept it. Okay, so for, let's just say by chance you want to use your company library. Mr. Porter, walk them through these templates here. I'm going to open this up for templates for e-signing. As you guys can see, there are a couple of them there, but the intention is for you to use the electronic documents. Although there are PDF copies, you want to make sure that you go ahead and get your affiliation with the board so that you can get your NERDS ID and you can actually use the interactive copies. Does anybody have any questions? Apologies. Let me let Mr. Porter back in. I think he may have gotten kicked out.
I do have one question, Jasmine. This is Aurelia. How can you see where your NERD ID is? Can you check that?
You can check it. And when you join the board, you should have gotten a card that has your NERDS ID on it.
Mm-hmm. I know my ID, but I'm trying to find out, how do you check that in Brokermint? And it should be in there. I know the forms won't be interactive unless you put the NERD ID, right? but I wanted
Yeah,
to
you
see
gotta
where
put your
it is.
correct NERDS ID in there.
Okay.
Hey, Jasmine, I got kicked off for a second. You were asking me to do something.
Yes. So I was talking to them about the difference in the electronic forms that are gonna be available to them once they put their NERDS ID in versus these PDF templates that we've uploaded for their convenience.
Okay. So what did you, so basically the form, can you guys hear me? I got a mask on and I'm
Yes.
actually moving away. Okay. So the forms portion of it is the interactive templates that we're creating. So if you notice in Brokermint, when you go in now, you're going to see Maryland buyer, Maryland listed, Maryland buyer's tenancy, and Maryland rental listing. But what we're going to do is make sure that we include your DC forms and your Virginia forms for all of those templates as well, so that you don't really have to do anything but use the forms within the transaction, which is going to make it really easy for you guys. All right. So what Jasmine was, I guess, alluding to was that you have the ability to do the same thing that we're going to do for you in case you need to create a form. So what she did was uploaded this particular form into Brokermint. Say, for instance, you're doing a transaction, you need a general addendum. That form might not be in your forms that we're creating for you, but you have the ability to upload those forms into Brokermint and then go through, as she was showing you, adding the fields that you need to add, including the text field, so that you can have a large text field and you can type in all the information on your general addendum that you want to add. You can put the appropriate property address, buyer, seller, what they're agreeing to, add the signatures, who signs, which signatures, and in what order, and then you can upload that. And I don't know if you guys can do it on your side, and that's something that we might need to look at. But you should have the ability, or we might be able to give you the ability to even make that a template, just in case you want to go back and ever use that form again within your own Brokermint, your Brokermint transaction form. So we're going to have some that are brokerage wide, which are the ones that we always use. You'll only be able to access them with your NERDS ID. And we're also checking to make sure that that's going to activate any DC or Virginia forms if they have them available in Brokermint. And if not, then we're going to go through the process, and we've already actually started the process of creating those forms for you as templates. So there's going to be, when you go into the forms, use forms, you're going to have a choice to either use the Maryland forms, go to your Brokermint library, and choose documents within there. So it'll be working with buyers, and it'll be your Virginia forms. So the templates will be available for you one way or another. We're going to try to do as many of them as possible, but there's going to be an eventuality where you might have to upload a document yourself and then put the signature fields and your text fields and everything in there. But either way, it's going to make it really, really easy for you. It sounds complicated, but I promise you it's a lot easier than anything we've ever done before. I hope that answered your question. Can everybody hear me? Oh boy.
Yes.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay. Whew, I thought I was talking all that time for nothing. All right. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, thank you, Mr. Porter, for that information. I'm gonna actually go in through my account because I have limited functionality without my NERDS ID being in there. So give me just a second, and I'm gonna actually pull up my own account so that we can walk through one. I want you guys to see what it looks like from both the buying side and from the listing side as well. All right,
And
so
one thing, while you're doing that, Jasmine, one thing I'm going to encourage you guys to do is, like I always say, please go ahead into Brokermint and set it up. You know, set it up ahead of time. You know, create a fake transaction just so that you can, you know, practice how to do it. And I would encourage you to set up a buyer's transaction, a pretend or a training, buy, however you want to word it, fake training, whatever. But set up a buyer's transaction. You know, go through the process of setting it up so you get used to it. Make sure that you're adding all of the functions. Please don't forget to add yourself when it gets down to the commission part. It's going to say add an agent. A lot of people forget to add themselves as the agent for the transaction. Add as many of your contacts information as possible. You know, the more information you put in there, the better it is for you, because these forms actually autofill all the information that you're putting in there based upon what you do ahead of time, so that you don't have to go through and be add things to it as you go. So put as much information for your contacts, the property address, all of that good stuff that you can ahead of time when you're setting up that transaction. Then go ahead in there, add that checklist. Don't ever forget that you got to add the checklist, okay? When you add the checklist for buyers, you need an acceptance date, you need a closing date. On the listing side, you're going to need all the dates, but you start out with the listing date and the expiration date. And what that does is acts as an anchor until you get an acceptance date, or closing date from a buyer on the listing side. But you add your dates in there, and then you have that transaction available to you. Now your forms, once you go in there, you got to make sure you get your NERDS ID. If you don't have it, you need to join a board. You got to get that NERDS ID. That's mandatory, by the way, guys. We actually, as a brokerage, we need to reinforce that. We haven't done a very good job reinforcing it with everybody, but we have to do that this year. So everybody's going to have to join the board. You're going to have your own NERDS ID. And that's really important for you in your success, in the success of your business going forward. But that NERDS ID is very crucial. You add it, it's going to give you access to everything. Okay. And that's what's really important. So once you get all of that set up, please just play with it. You know, make pretend transactions, make pretend, you know, scenarios, so that when you actually in real time, it's very easy to you. And again, this is a very, very easy process. It sounds complicated because you're not doing it, but once you start to play with it, you'll see how easy it is.
excellent. All right, so I'm gonna go into this transaction now. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you guys. All right, so now I'm in my actual account versus the trainer account, so you guys will be able to see from the checklist here. So I'm going to add the checklist. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So we have the buyer's agent's name there. All right, so I had to recreate it really quickly. All right, so now you can really see what this is going to look like. So when I go to use forms, when I already have my NERDS ID in there, you see the forms that are there. Now I click on next and I have the information right here. So just like we said, this information is like what it would be in your view details task. You have your buyer's agent. You could put your seller's information there. So all the parties to the transaction, these are the signers and other parties to the transaction. This is where they would go. So your buyer, whether it's buyer number one, buyer number two, however many, your seller's information there also. And if you needed to add an additional signer, this is where you would add it. So you go to next, and it's preparing the actual document for me. So now you guys are going to get to see the actual interactive version of the document, okay? So now you see it's actually added that information to the forms for me. So this is what your interactive documents are going to look like when you add your NERDS ID, okay? Just like Mr. Porter said, when you join the board, you're going to get your NERDS.
Can't hear you.
as realtors, okay? So you're gonna input that information, you have the buyer, and as you see, your signature fields, initial fields are there, and any information that you've already put into that section that we just came past where it said contacts and contact information, it's gonna populate that into the transaction. You see your brokerage information is there, the signature field for the buyers are there, notification of dual agency with the team, you see all your signature fields are there, all right? And the basic information for your brokerage will be there. Of course, you'll just choose your date for your offer, your buyers. You can go ahead and either fill now or, type the information in. The more information you type, however, in the previous field that we just came from, the more information that's going to be here. So if by chance this were complete, we simply go to save. If I want to save that information, let's see that, but instead of saving it, I'm going to go to send it for signature so you can see what that looks like. So I send it for signature right here. So I have the buyer right there. So Angela Skipper, you're going to receive it. Okay. So I'm going to send this on over to you. So if I sign or order, let's see, it actually wants me to add information here. So I'm going to have to go ahead and put, all right, Anitha, you're up. You're the buyer. Talita, you're up. You're the buyer's agent, the seller. So this is good to see because it won't even allow you to omit critical information. All right. So any information that's going to be crucial to the transaction, you're going to need to put that information there. All right. So put that information there. Buyer number 2, just for the sake of this. All right. So now it has everybody's full name, has everybody's email address. It knows who the parties to the transaction are. And when you go down to the bottom, you'll actually be able to send it. All right. So we literally just clicked on use the forms. Your NERDS ID was in there. So the forms were there. The information that you put in, it's going to populate it into the form and you simply send it out. You're going to customize it, of course, putting your buyer specifications for the transaction. But now it's sent out to all of us. So those that are on the call, you saw that I sent it to you. I want you to actually go in through either your cell phone or your tablets because I want you to see what it looks like on the buyer side of the transaction. So take a quick moment and go in and sign off on the document that I just sent to you. And of course, this is a dummy document, but at least you'll have experience with it. All right.
So Mrs. Porter,
Yes.
I saw that you filled in every line there. So if you only have one buyer and one seller, does it make you put in that there is nobody there somehow? Or
You just delete the field. That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that. So you would delete the field.
Okay.
So you see, right? So on the right-hand side, you'll have the option to delete the field. Or if you keep the field, you're going to have to put somebody's name there.
Okay.
If you don't need the field, you see right here?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm going to delete this one. Buyer number 2. Delete the signer. If you only represent that buyer, so you can delete the seller. I'm glad you asked that question. Okay. So it's only specific to the party that you're going to actually have signed. So if you just did this, now it only requires for that one person to sign.
Oh, so if you're at the beginning of your contract, your transaction, and you don't have if you're a seller who doesn't have a buyer yet, or a buyer who doesn't have a seller yet, when you want the signatures to go through, you delete all the fields that you don't need.
Yes, perfect. I'm so glad you asked that question. That's exactly what you're going to do.
All right. And then the other question for me is, because I'm in the middle of 2 transactions that will probably go on past May 1st. So you would download and upload the forms, but they would continue to be the PDF forms. So I would still have to work with them as PDFs.
Do you have ratified contracts?
No, I have broker agreements.
So you would send your offers from Brokermint.
Okay.
Yep. And your buyer brokerage agreement that you currently have signed, you'll simply upload it as a document. But as you're preparing the offer, come right here to Brokermint.
Okay, all right.
Okay? And you see that information is right there,
Mhm.
right? You can fill your whole offer right there. Now you can either save and close or click on that drop down arrow so that you go to send to signatures. So if you make a mistake and you need to discard your changes, you're just gonna click on discard changes. If you want to print it, if you want to download it, you can do all of those things from there. Okay? If I want to send it out for a signature, I send it to a signature. And this one is actually just gonna go to Angela Skipper because I deleted all the other parties. So I click on send and that information is right there. So as you can see with your transactions, all the documents that you need to fulfill these various sections of this checklist are all going to be here. So you don't need to go anywhere to get them. They're all right here. Make
Excellent,
sense?
excellent.
All right. So those are available to you. Now we're running short on time, so I won't be able to go through the listing side, but I did want to walk us through that completely so that you guys can see what that looks like. And I'll bring your attention to a couple other things really quickly. So as you actually get a ratified contract for that buyer, you see this box over here that says edit. You're going to click on edit. And you see you have the option to edit, delete, switch to pending, cancel, or close. You guys won't have the option to close because we have to verify documents before we do so. However, when you get that buyer actually under contract, you're going to come back and put the appropriate dates in here, and you're going to put the property address in there. So it won't just be the buyer's name as a placeholder. You're going to actually put the property address in there and the appropriate dates. Make sense?
It does.
All right. And then you're also going to click on it and you're going to switch it to pending. So once you go under a ratified contract, now you're going to switch that to pending. So I'm going to switch the sale to pending. And now this is going to show up in your pipeline. So your funnels that show you which properties you have ratified contracts on and the transactions that you're currently working on, this is going to now switch to pending. Okay. So now when you go back to your checklist, there are additional things that you're going to need to do. Right now, this is going to tell you what you need to do every step of the way. So of course, everything here that you normally need, and you just go down that checklist the way that you normally would. The options that simply say upload, those are things that you're going to upload there so that by the time you get to the end of this transaction, all of the pertinent documents are already in the place they need to be, and you can simply submit this for review. And just as a reminder to all of us, this Brokermint system is where you submit all of your documents for review, okay? So you see over here, anything that you have to turn into the office, this is where you do so. You click on submit, and now that document has been submitted, okay? That's how I receive it as the broker. That's how I know, okay, this person has a contract they want me to review because it's submitted directly through your Brokermint account, and it'll be submitted to me so that I know to go in there and check off on it for you, okay? That being said, if you need to add additional contacts, you see over here where you say contacts, you can add contacts. If you needed to edit the commission on the transaction, you could edit the commission on the transaction. Okay. If you needed to look at the activities, you can look at the activities on the transaction.
I don't know if they have those functions. So
Okay, so I will have to.
yes, some of those are administrative functions, and we have to look at you guys' account. Some of those activities you won't be able to see, but if you ever need them, we can pull them for you.
Okay, so I'm sure that they can add contacts. All right,
Yes.
their commission, so you can add your commissions to the account as well. It may be from a different step. So if we need to go back over that, we can do that.
They can add the commission, but they can't go back and edit it once they put it in.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Good pointer there. We're
Yeah,
gonna
we
get
can,
ready to.
we'll update it, guys, when we finalize your checks and everything. We'll make sure we update it and look at the altar and verify all the information on the final altar. So just one more thing, when you do get a settlement, that's a very important document. We can't even begin to process your payment without that final altar.
Okay.
And that goes without saying.
Yeah.
So the fully ratified contract with all the addenda as well as the finalized alter signed by all parties. We can't even legally release anything to you without having seen and verified those things. All right. So one of the things that Curtis was mentioning earlier is the ability to email the parties to the transaction from your actual portal. And this is how you do it. I'm going to come out of this and go right back into it because you're here at any stage. If you wanted to actually email somebody, look over to the right-hand side, just like you can download, submit, edit, and so forth and so on. You can simply email. So if you wanted to email somebody, a party to the transaction, if you just wanted to put your great offer or whatever the case is, you put that information over here. You can send this person an email. All right, they just got the email. All right.
So quick.
And
Go ahead, Anita.
A quick question. So
Sure.
say for instance, you know, it's on the contract of sale, right? And we want to change the offer amount. And so we would click on the contract of sale and we would then go to edit. And so how would we want to send it back to them. So we would go on and edit and then.
are you talking about the actual document, Anita?
Right, I'm talking about the actual document. So we
Okay.
started out with 850, right? But we want to increase it to 855. So, you know, we initially sent the offer for 850 and maybe we've been negotiating back and forth and we've agreed with the seller that yes, we'll do 855. So we want to go into that particular document and change it to 855. Then we, is that the same place that we would email them and make that change?
So that's a very good question.
So
So you go ahead, Mr. Porter.
go ahead. If you, what I was going to say is on that, with that kind of correction, what it looks like from what we can tell right now is that you would have to then download the PDF, the front page of whatever and then upload it, put the strike through on there, and then initial with the text with the new price and initials, and then save that form.
Right, and then send it via email just to let them know. Well, actually, then we just send it to them just like regular for their signature.
Yeah, so once you send those signatures, they automatically get an email anyway that they have to then sign, and it also gives them a record of it.
Right, okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then my question back to if you're clear, Anita.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so this is D. So my question is about Miss Porter, you were talking about when you submit for editing so that you can review things. So like you keep reminding me and I keep forgetting to put a picture up because it's coming soon. So would that, how would you attach a picture to Brokermint, or is the listing separate, or how does that work? The MLS listing is separate from Brokermint. Is that correct?
That's an excellent question, and I'm so glad you asked. So the MLS listing is separate from Brokermint. In the MLS, you're going to upload your remarks and your photos. Your remarks, you're supposed to, you know, any type of advertisement, you're supposed to submit them to the office for approval. The photo per se, you don't have to submit that. So any of your listing remarks, you just shoot those over. If you wanted to include them in this system as like a PDF or something, you could, and you could submit them for review. So I'm glad you asked that, and we'll talk more about it. I'll send out an update as well for anybody else who may not remember that particular aspect. So the things that are, go ahead.
I was gonna say, Jasmine, before you go, one of the thing that Curtis was talking about, in addition to the email, was if you go down to documents real quick, if you can just go over the documents on, and that's not what I wanted. Close that out. Documents here, right there. Okay, and then go to unsorted. So guys, when you go to unsorted, if you go up to the top, Jasmine, you see that little code up there, that unique code. If you copy that, you can copy, right click and copy it.
Uh-huh.
And then once you copy that, you can go to any of your emails that you've received that have attachments and forward that email with that attachment to that unique code, and it'll drop it in your unsorted documents for you automatically. So essentially, you can just cut that, copy that unique code, go into your email. Say, for instance, you got a whole bunch of emails with a whole bunch of attachments from the listing agent. You can just, type her name in there, find all the attachments, forward each one of them to this unique code, and it'll put the attachments into this section in Brokermint for you automatically.
That's wonderful. So that means that all of your communication on a transaction could be recorded in Brokermint.
Yes, you can. So any attachments that you're getting, if they're sending you now, the HOA documents normally come in a zip file. You would have to unzip them and send them individually, but you wouldn't have to download them and upload them. You can just forward them to that code, and it'll find this particular transaction and automatically put those attachments into these as documents, into this unsorted document folder as documents.
Okay, on another question on that, because this is what I was getting ready to ask about. So if you're working with a prospective tenant and you keep going to different agents asking about different properties, can you email from Brokermint? Can you email those agents from Brokermint directly?
Yes, you can.
You can, absolutely.
And so the second is, should you do that?
I think for the sake of just keeping everything seamless, the whole point of that Brokermint is to capture a transaction. So if you're still trying to find a property for that person, I would just do an email the regular way. Once you have them ratified or under their application, or they've accepted their application, then make that transaction and then communicate email wise and everything through Brokermint. So you don't have to go back out anymore once it's an actual transaction. Does that make sense, Steve?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Okay.
Great questions and great pointers there. We're going to stop right there for today because we're a few minutes over time, and I want to honor your guys' time and let you get back to having a tremendous rest of the day. Hopefully you found this information very insightful. We are very much excited for this transition and what it's going to mean for us in terms of efficiency in our transactions, in terms of everything being in one place. And you guys know how our responsibility to keep everything for every transaction we do up to 3 years. Well, Brokermint's going to help with that, because now you have everything in one seamless place and you don't have to go searching for it. At the end of your transaction, once it's closed out, it also sends you a completed transaction. So every single aspect of your transaction, it's going to send all of those documents to you in one file so that you can have it for electronic keeping, okay? So we'll pick up next week because we're going to go through the listing side. Today, we only made it through the buying side. But does anybody have any other questions before we go ahead and close out for the day?
Yes, I have one quick question. What happens to Dotloop and the information that we have in there currently?
That's an excellent
Once it's
question.
closed.
And thank you for asking that. So on May the 1st, we are getting rid of Dotloop. Okay, so we will have access as a brokerage up until, well, as the broker and administrator, we'll have access to it for about a month or so after that. For all of your transactions that you're currently working on, like I had asked Dee if she's under a ratified contract, then it should be in Brokermint. If you haven't migrated those contracts over to Brokermint, they should be there. So go ahead and put them there. If it's simply buyer brokerage agreements, you can go ahead and create the transactions in Brokermint also. If they're former transactions that have been closed out already, those former transactions should already be in Brokermint as well. So the short answer is this is the migration period for everything that you guys are working on. Put that in Brokermint. And any new transactions that you start those in Brokermint afresh.
I have a question.
Sure.
My question is inside my most recent transaction, I noticed that there are a lot of duplicate tasks. I'm sure it's not a big deal, but it's, I see all those little red things.
You said duplicate what?
Tasks. Like
So it,
where I have uploaded something, there's like maybe one or two tasks that say the same thing.
so that means that I will have to look at your particular transaction and I can get into that with you.
Okay.
But that sounds like a glitch. I've never seen that happen. That
Understood.
sounds like some
Yeah.
type of glitch.
Yeah.
But sometimes now Brokermint doesn't limit you to adding multiple buyer checklists. So if you've added 2 buyer checklists by mistake, then it's trying to work between
Which
the
is
2 of them. It
possible.
might have incorporated. So you need to erase one of them and
Right.
just use one checklist. So I'll look at your particular transaction. Just text me the address and
Okay.
and I'll call you and we can clean it up.
Okay, thank you.
You guys are the best. We're gonna go ahead and close out again. Have a productive rest of the day. If you need anything, give Mr. Porter a call. All right, guys, and we will talk to you the same time, same place next Thursday.
All right, then.
All right, guys, have a great day.
You too.